everybody, and welcome back to the 63rd episode of the Oligarchy Disrupted podcast with your host, Bennett and Leon, and we have the lovely Ashley Downing with us as well.
Hi, everybody.
All right. Oh, by the way, guys, it's part 2 of this episode, and once again, we're going to be resuming that episode that we were watching yesterday. Once again, featuring Jimmy Dore and Nick Brana, who was one of the staff members for Our Revolution and the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2016. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump right back into that. So just give me 2 segundos. Or maybe just 1 segundo. Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's just pick up where we are, where we left off. About 10 minutes left in the video. Let's ride this bitch up. Okay.
Institutional pressure in the party moderates elected officials and reels them into the mainstream. The Democratic Party blocks most progressives from getting into office, and the few that make it through are then dependent.
Oh, by the way, for those who didn't watch yesterday and you're just tuning into this video or you're just listening in and to this podcast episode, what Jimmy Dore is talking about right now is a series of tweets that Nick Brana had tweeted out on Twitter, of course, right? So he's just reading those out loud for everybody to kind of watch and follow along. But a really, really interesting thread. If you did not catch the last episode, definitely be sure to catch the last one before diving into this one. So you can kind of get the gist and catch up on everything.
Dependent on the party for their power, privilege, and career. Boy, have we seen that play out with AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Ro Khanna. It's amazing, and it's just amazing. And Bernie, Elizabeth Warren, Sherrod Brown. It's amazing to see them go along with the biggest transfer of wealth in the history of the world. It was stunning. So that's what you're saying has happened has just happened to them, and it's continuing to happen. And we keep pointing it out. And now slowly other progressive news shows are also starting to call out the Squad and Bernie for being complicit with the corporate giveaway and the biggest transfer of wealth in the history of our country.
Podcasts, including ones like ours. I know, I guess we should be really proud of
right,
critiquing Bernie Sanders or whatever, but in this case it is a good thing because that means that we're sticking to our convictions. We're sticking to the reasons why we started this podcast, why we care about politics, why we want things to be different. So
absolutely. Sometimes you have to talk about the tough stuff. Well, all the time you have to talk about the tough stuff. Yeah.
Those are just again.
And you know why? Because they are complicit. And so you go on to say they have to befriend neoliberal committee chairs and party leaders for committee assignments and to get their legislation heard. They have to horse trade with moderates. Which is why AOC, none of them will call out Nancy Pelosi, and which is why Bernie won't call out Chuck Schumer. That's why. And until they do that, nothing will happen, which is why nothing is happening, which means that they're not nice people. They're self-interested career climbers, including fucking Bernie. Bernie's looking out for his committee assignments. His own press secretary said, surrogate said that he ran his campaign from a point of view of I want to keep my senatorial appointments, committee appointments, not from I want to win this race. So that's self-interest. That's not Bernie being nice. That's what people got to get over. This isn't about Bernie just doesn't understand he needs to fight more. Bernie doesn't fight more because he understands the consequences and he doesn't want them. He doesn't want to be like Ralph Nader. He doesn't want the wrath of Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, or the establishment. He really doesn't. Am I right?
Okay, so let's talk about that. I think that's a great a little segment that we saw there. So Jimmy Dore talks about Ralph Nader, right? And how Bernie Sanders does not want to be there. That's his theory. And it really does make a lot of sense. Why? Because Ralph Nader did the right thing, was like everything that Bernie Sanders is supposed to be, except he's not calling out the Democratic Party when they're doing all these wrong things. You know, he's not calling out Nancy Pelosi when she's standing against UBI payments. She's not standing against Barack Obama when he gave away his $800 billion in the TARP program to corporate America and Wall Street, and while also kicking out over 5 million people from their houses. Didn't call out other mainstream Democrats for doing all these horrendous things. So I mean, this is just a horrific cycle that we're kind of caught up in. But your kind of take on what he just are talking about.
Exactly. Exactly everything that he's saying. It's really amazing when and it's actually kind of funny when you hear Trump talk about the squad. And sure, that they are, this group of more progressive candidates that made it, into Congress, but are they really the progressive squad anymore? I mean, how much are they really doing to better the general public instead of further their political careers? And you have to kind of wonder that, especially, and I hate to say that this is a sort of a consequence of Bernie as well, but it kind of is. You put so much faith in this one person and really believe that he's this leader of the progressive movement, and then you comes to find out he was wanting to take billionaire money. So it does make you question all these other progressive candidates that are in Congress also. And like he was saying, he wants to keep his Senate seat. These people also want to keep their congressional seats. So there obviously are some concessions that politicians have to make. That's just the part of life. There's compromise, and you need to have compromise because we don't live in a country where everybody agrees on everything. However, the things that they're conceding on are things that they ran on to get in office, that people voted them in office for, which is also just mind-boggling to me that they think, like he was saying yesterday, and I'm sure he's going to continue to talk about in the rest of the video, how it was almost like Bernie just didn't believe in it anymore. He didn't believe that he could, which Weaver, sort of pushed him in that direction as well. But it was like, this is what's gotten you so far, is your consistency with these progressive populist policies. And then for him to say, oh, you know what, maybe we can't do it with just citizens' money. Maybe we really do need the help from corporate America. And it's just like, you ran on everything against this. So it makes me question everybody else who's already there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think you're actually 100% right about that, because I mean, I know myself, I've definitely started judging progressives more critically during this time than I ever have before. People like AOC, I never used to look at her under those type of lens, but ever since finding out about that roll call vote for the stimulus bill and how she did not stand up, none of the progressives stood up when they were expected, and they campaign on being truth tellers and being on the side of the working class. Like, if you're on the side of the working class, then you should be standing up and wanting your voice recorded so that you can go back to your constituents later on when you're coming back from election time and be like, okay, guys, I stood up for you here, 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 and here. But they're not going to do that. Why? Because they're going to vote for it so that they can appease the moderate people that are in charge of the party, aka the Nancy Pelosi's, the people that are in charge, like they're kind of alluding to in this video. They're saying that they have to make concessions. They have to work with these people, and that's part of this. And then, so really,
which is just another reason why we need another party, a hashtag People's Party, like Nick Brana has here.
Literally. Okay, so let's continue the video.
Right about that?
It's true, and I go on to kind of identify some of the other institutional forces, and so I don't know if you planned on
here. I'll show them. You say they have to spend personal time with and win votes from the establishment Democrats who were easy to criticize from the outside. These dynamics quickly take the edge off their critiques of the party and their colleagues, and it waters down their messages and platforms, which is why you'll see AOC wave her arms and scream about the stimulus bill while voting for it, and also at the same time saying it's a joke and an insult of a bill, but I'm not going to call out anybody who votes for it.
Let's just pause that really quick and kind of talk about, because he brings up a really good point, which is how progressives nowadays are more like mouthpieces. They give a lot of lip service. They are mouthpieces for the movement, right? But they don't really do a lot of like solid actions to progress the movement forward. You know,
they don't walk the walk or walk their talk.
Your take on that, Ash? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that when we did talk about this previously with the second stimulus bill, we had talked about the fact that this was actually a recorded vote, and AOC was among the few people who spoke out against it and voted no. But she did it the first time, and it's very convenient that the vote that's recorded is the vote that she decides to speak out on. And then kind of like what I was saying before, now you have this whole thing with Bernie, so it just makes you question people's motives even more.
Like, who can we trust anymore, guys? Like, who's left?
Well, and like you were saying, they're all talking the same talk, but they once they get in the position where they can actually do something, they walk the same walk as everybody else in the building. They don't do anything different, even though they've talked this big game, like Bernie and Elizabeth Warren saying they want to, feed out corruption, and then they just decide to walk right in the room and join.
How is that any better than like Donald Trump, like saying that he running on the fact that he's going to drain the swamp and literally filling it in ways that we've never seen before with the swamp of people that he could possibly think of. So
it's just hypocrisy.
Interesting, very interesting to kind of be aware of. So let's resume the video.
Those two things are incongruent, and they show exactly what Nick is pointing out here. That's exactly what has happened to AOC already. She's going to scream and rail against the Republicans, but she'll never scream and rail against Nancy Pelosi or the other Democrats who are actually the people she has the influence over or on. You go on to say, that's why Bernie almost never, and this is the fact, ask Tim Canova, that's why Bernie almost never supports primary challenges against incumbent Democrats in Congress, and why even AOC is backing away from creating a corporate-free caucus in the House and supporting the primary challenges she said she would 2 years ago. So Cenk Uyghur's already calling out AOC for this kind of bullshit. I've been calling her out for it for a while. Now you're calling her out. I hope other progressive shows start calling her out for it. Because this.
Oh, I wanted to mention something really, really interesting that kind of popped in my head as soon as we started talking about AOC more and the Democrats in Congress. So the organization, a lot of people know this organization because of AOC. They were the organization that got her into it. Her, Ilhan Omar, like all these people, right? So it's Justice Democrats. The Justice Democrats now have formed the super PAC. So the people that put AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and all these other progressives, and probably aiming for many more progressives to get into Congress using that organization, they're forming a super PAC at the same time. Like, what the fuck is that? Like, is there no decency anymore? Like, Bernie Sanders with Our Revolution, this now with Justice Democrats that we're finding out, like, I can't take much more, guys. These are just gut punches to me. Literally. So let's go ahead and resume.
This is exactly the opposite of. So now people like AOC won't even back now. So let me throw it to you, Nick. This is what. So this has been evident with Bernie for a while. I just didn't see it, and now it's obvious for the entire squad and Bernie Sanders himself that this is actually the case. That they've been. Well, let me see. No, you say you don't. You don't change the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party changes you, right?
Yeah, that's just it. Is that, as much as we can criticize, and this is something that I really wanted to share with folks on your show, is that I think that for a long time there was kind of there was like a vow of silence. I've heard Chomsky use that term before, around criticizing Bernie and around criticizing, other members of the progressive movement, but particularly him. And I think that now that's changing. I think you played a large role in that, Jimmy, and I think that's, frankly, something that the movement is, really in your debt for, because it's not healthy. It's not healthy to me, like change and improvement and growth as a movement requires introspection. It requires us to think about what's working and what isn't. It requires us to hold each other accountable. And if we're not doing that, then we're stagnant or we're repeating strategies that just don't work, And so
that guy is 100% hitting the nail on the head with that, because if anything, what we're kind of experiencing is stagnation or declination.
Definitely.
And we have been experiencing that. It's not anything new. It's decades old, and purposeful.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting that he says, the Democratic Party changes you instead of vice versa, because people have this idea, and if I'm thinking of the right episode, I think when we were talking with Professor David Ferris, this was sort of mentioned too, that, the best way to change the Democratic, to make things, politics more progressive is within the Democratic Party. But I just think that is completely false. I don't think that that's possible. Because, and for all the reasons that he's saying, and kind of for what he was saying in his tweet before as well, people are like AOC and all these other progressive men and women now, they will speak out against Republicans, but they can't speak out, they won't speak out against Democrats. Which is the problem, We didn't put you there because we want you to be a Democrat. We put you there because we wanted you to be progressive, not follow the Democratic establishment. So I just think that everything he's saying is so spot on with the fact that hashtag Dem exit is the only way to go now. It really is. I don't see any other way of getting progressive policies actually pushed forward.
I mean, I don't know. I can't see anything either, but let's go ahead and see what they have to say about it.
This doesn't mean that, necessarily pointing, critiquing an action of someone. People can be so black and white. And, it's critiquing an action that someone takes doesn't mean that you hate them or that you oppose everything that they stand for or that you don't want to see them win. I would like to see Bernie unsuspend his campaign.
Me too.
And replace Biden. But I can hold that simultaneously, not, mutually exclusively, with the criticisms that I have of him and his campaign. And I believe that other people should be able to do that for him, for AOC, for the other members of the squad, for other people who are with us, where we disagree with them or where we think that they aren't living up to to ideals that the movement embodies. And that's how we produce change.
You don't produce change by making excuses for people doing the wrong thing, and for not calling them out. And Bernie it's funny. Bernie's the one who tells people like me, hold my feet to the fire. I have the videotape of him saying that. And don't listen to me. You should listen to yourselves. I have the videotape. And now all of a sudden in 2020, you're irresponsible if you don't listen to him. I guess we're not supposed to hold his feet to the fire. I don't know what's going on. So now, because of this, you're making a push for a third party, and it's a movement for a people's party. And here's a stat you tweeted out about America's views on the need for a third party. In your view, do the Republican and Democratic parties do an adequate job of representing the American people, or do they do such a poor job that a third major party is needed? And so the dark green is the people who want to say a third major party is needed. Wow. It's somewhere around 60% of the country says that. And
wow, 60% of Americans think that a third party is needed.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And yet, at the same time, to be aware of how people actually vote come November in election time, really interesting.
And the amount of, and I talked about this in my previous blog post, the amount of shit people give you for voting third party is astronomical. I mean, it's literally like the worst thing to tell somebody in election season.
I mean, why do you think that Bernie Sanders doesn't want to be the next Ralph Nader? Why? Because he's basically on the fringes of the political establishment. He was been forgotten since he went up against Al Gore, and they blamed him for the loss of Al Gore against George W. Bush.
Well, and he didn't want to run third party because he didn't think that he would be elected to the presidency if he ran third party. That's why he ran as a Democrat, which clearly was not a good choice.
My bad. Yeah, yes, exactly. So it's horrible. So I mean, but once again, that's why Bernie Sanders is scared. He doesn't want to be known that way. Doesn't want to be disregarded in that way. But at the same time, by taking that choice, by going that route, you're sacrificing your integrity, your consistency, the reason why all these people are following you, and basically the integrity of your movement.
Completely.
So, I don't know. Let's go ahead and resume the video.
And it's somewhere under 40%. Under 40% of the people think the Democrats and Republicans do a good job. So an overwhelming majority of people think the two parties do a horrible job, and an overwhelming majority thinks we should have a third party. The point of Bernie staying on the ballot is twofold. Well, part of it is that he wants to get delegates so he can have a pretend influence on a platform that has absolutely no influence on anything. So it's just a charade. 100%. And anybody who tells you that the Democratic platform matters a bit is either a fucking idiot or a party hack. They're just an idiot or a party hack, because the platform has absolutely no effect on anything. It never has. It never will. It's never gonna. So anybody who tells you that Bernie's staying in to get delegates so he can influence the platform is straight up fucking gaslighting you. And if Bernie tells you that, he is also gaslighting you, just like when Bernie gaslights you to say that Joe Biden is the answer to our problems right now. A demented guy who's to the right of Trump. Bernie's lying to you when he says that because he's protecting his own position. So he'll lie to you. And he's doing it right now. Is that too strong of me to say, Nick, that Bernie's lying to you when he says you should vote for Joe Biden? Because he is actually lying to you, because Joe Biden is a demented right-winger who's worse. Go ahead. I'll just throw it to you.
I think Bernie knows better that Biden really is not going to change. I think that, even if he was willing to change, I don't necessarily see. I haven't seen from Bernie that he's willing to do what is necessary to make him change. Bernie's staff recently had to petition him openly just to keep the organizing operation going. This was kind of one of those Our Revolution moments for me. I was like, holy shit, the staff are engaged in this fight with him, just like we were. And it's it makes so little sense. And I just don't understand the rationale behind it. so Bernie built up this amazing organizing apparatus during the campaign, and if you're going to suspend the campaign, it seems like there's a lot of other worthy causes that could, that you could continue to organize around, like maybe, mutual aid, or a rent strike, or a general strike, or a new party, or, even according to, whatever you're trying to do, Bernie, helping Biden, or down ballot progressives. But like the idea that you would just like kind of let it languish or disband it, or that you wouldn't even, or that your staff would have to like ask you to move it back to our revolution, is like, I thought that was a given. Why do like hundreds of staffers have to sign a letter telling you to keep your organizing going? You said you were going to be the organizer in chief, so like, even if Biden was movable, as far as Bernie, I don't see him taking the steps that would be required even to move him. Because if there ever was a time to be organizer in chief, it's now, during a pandemic, during a global financial meltdown. When a third of people couldn't pay like their rent, when there's bread lines forming across the country, is like, if there ever is a time to get progressive issues like moving, it's now. And I don't see him like engaging to the level that's required.
So that is the end of the video. So once again, let's just kind of go over the gist of it. So what do we find out from this episode? We found out that a third party is supported by the majority of Americans. We found out that AOC and other progressives are not as strong as we thought they were, or on our side, at least as much as we thought they were. We found out that a lot of the progressives do way more lip service than they do walk the walk, if you want to look at it like that. And anything else that we learned? Oh yeah, that Bernie Sanders does not want to be or to end up like Ralph Nader, like the Ross Perot, or any other person that threatened the two-party duopoly in this country. Anything else?
That it is physically, that it's really seeming to look like it's physically impossible to do anything inside the Democratic Party. That's not going to be stagnant. There's no upward mobility in the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm. It definitely does not seem that way. What's become increasingly apparent is I've kind of like been watching more and more is that like you just can't work within the Democratic Party and expect to actually get somewhere if you're a progressive. You know what I'm saying? Like Bernie Sanders tried it, AOC is trying it, other progressives are trying it. No progressive has actually tried it and made it since FDR in the 30s. And like I mentioned in other episodes, that is not a mistake. That no one has succeeded since then.
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, it hasn't, like, let's not forget how long ago it was that these people were elected. Not that long ago. I mean, we have people in Congress that have been there for a very long time. So the fact that they haven't even been there that long and it's already like we're listening to, I don't want to say mini Nancy Pelosi's, but we're listening to people who are starting to get their feet wet and realize, I don't know, maybe I'm comfy here. Maybe I don't want to push the envelope as much as I said I did. And they haven't even been there that long. They haven't even been there that long. So that's a bit scary.
It is. But at the same time, they are overall, at least, I mean, she did vote against the second stimulus bill. She does support a lot of these good things. She does go out into her community and give out food during the COVID pandemic. AOC is she seems like a great person, which is why it makes zero sense for her to do the actions that she's taking, even though they're very low key, and she's doing a pretty good job of it by fooling most Democrats so far. But the few of us that are aware and do know, we see you. You know, we see you, we see Bernie Sanders, we see the rest of the progressives that are not stepping up for us. And what we need to understand from that is that if they're not going to do it, then we have to. Because what happens when all of our establishments, all our institutions fail? It's left to us. So, and that's where we're really at, like I mentioned on the previous episode, or maybe the one before that, we're going to lose the White House. Pretty sure Donald Trump's going to keep that. The Senate, I'm pretty sure Mitch McConnell is going to hold on to that Republican Senate. The House, the Democrats can hope and pray to keep that. And even if they do, I'm sure nothing really substantial will come out of there anyways, like it has for like the last 2 years or so that they've
Don't forget the Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court as well. That's a goner. So I mean, when we lose all branches of government, what's left? So that's what I mean by saying that. So once again, guys, it's up to us. We have to stand up. We have to make our voices heard. I want to talk about this one article. I want to mention it really fast before we go. I was reading it by, I think it was Politico, and it was like how Puerto Ricans are going out and protesting the right things. And I actually shared it on our Facebook page, so you can go ahead and check it out there. But these people were showing up in their cars in caravans. They labeled it something. I think it was like caravans for the future or something like that. Whatever. But they had like microphones and they were yelling out of their car at the government because they had not. No one in Puerto Rico has gotten a stimulus check yet. B, they are constantly overlooked for a million different things, and especially when it comes to like the hurricanes that they have to endure and other natural disasters that they endure, not to mention corruption. Their fucking governor just stepped down in Puerto Rico. They have a lot to be upset about. And they're
not allowed to vote, but they're considered American citizens.
On top of that as well. So like that's just a few of the reasons that they're coming out. But they are coming out, but for the right reasons. And I'm sure they're scaring the right people. I'm sure they're scaring the right people in their territory. Yeah. So, anything to add on before we scram? That's all I have for today. Okay, go.
No, I think so.
Sounds good, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in once again to our podcast. We cannot wait to see you in the next episode. And of course, let everybody know about this. Your mom, your daddy, your grandpa, your dogs, your cats, your parents, your Uncle Stu that you haven't seen in like 6 years. So once again, just let them know that we're an up-and-coming podcast. We we only seek to educate you guys and arm you against the oligarchy that wants nothing more than to see us repressed. So let's do it, guys. Let's get out there. All right. So thanks again, and we will see you on the next episode.
Bye.